You know, there are a lot of things right with the American educational system, but there's a lot of things wrong, and no one knows more about both of those sides than our next guest, John Murphy, author of the new book, Mission Forsaken, the University of Phoenix Affair with Wall Street. John, welcome.
Thanks, David.
Now, I know that you have a lot to say about what University of Phoenix did wrong, but when you were one of the co-founders of the University of Phoenix, it was really a radical idea. Talk to me about that in those first days.
Well, the basis of it was a field study at San Jose State by the principal founder, John Sperling, who, based on a simple analysis of the changing demographics in American society, where in the 70s about 22% of people over 25 were in college. By 1990, it was going to be 50%. Mm-hmm. And the educational model that's in place was developed in the late 19th century, which is education in one place, certain months of the year, certain hours of the day, with passive learning, where students are passive learners rather than active learners. And everyone has to conform their lives to that model. And it was determined that working adults, anybody that is trying to earn a degree, can take literally 10 years taking one course a semester. They've got to drive 3 nights a week. They have to go to the bookstore. They've got to go to the counselor. They've got to do all these things while they're working full time. And a lot of people have families and other responsibilities. And the idea was basically an efficiency model that you provide education. We established campuses within 10 or 15 minutes of where people lived and worked, so there's no commute. We had no bookstore because we delivered the books and the curricular materials the first night of class. The instructors were all people with advanced degrees who had at least 5 years experience teaching in the area, the subject area that they were offering the class. So the element that made this all work was the recognition of the adult learner and their experience base. They've done a lot in life. They had families, they've been in the military, they've worked in businesses for a long time. And this was a model that was established, and we came into very severe challenges from the traditional educational establishment.
Yeah, because it wasn't that suddenly you and your fellow co-founders of University of Phoenix said, hi, we're no longer going to have a school based on a 19th century agrarian model. Here we are in the mid-late 20th century, we're going to have a new model. It wasn't like people said, wow, this is a great idea. They tried to kill this in the womb, didn't they?
They did, and you think of the transformation of this society, and particularly even till today, where communication was measured days, weeks, literally months, and even years. Now it's nanoseconds. And yet this model, based on the Carnegie unit, where everybody spends 15 hours in a chair for every 1 credit that they earn, is so antiquated, and particularly when more than half of all students now in college are over 25 and working. And
now over half?
Over half, if not more. And their whole lives, what University of Phoenix did is integrated the students' lives into an educational model rather than the other way around, where they had to fit their lives around whatever the model
right.
was.
So in a sense, the shorthand is you were talking about and instituted a user-friendly higher education system.
It was all predicated on the fact that adult students, one, have a lot of experience that they need to use in the class, the recognition that they've worked at least an 8-hour day prior to going to class. So it can't be a passive lecture model. It's got to be a highly interactive learning model where the students are as responsible for participating in the delivery of the material as is the instructor. And we started out doing the thing you're supposed to do. Phoenix was an outgrowth of a contract with St. Mary's College of Moraga that we brought over to Phoenix, Arizona, and to help them develop their off-campus program, because their traditional campus was going to go out of business because there weren't enough students enrolling. And within a year, we had like 300 students recruited for St. Mary's. And as an outgrowth of that, we decided to create the University of Phoenix and did the thing you're supposed to do, which is to get it accredited.
Right.
So we applied to the North Central Association, which is the accrediting body for Arizona and 18 other states, which is the sole legitimizing.
Right. If you're not accredited, you're not a real university.
Right. Basically, and it does a number of things. One, the degrees and credits are recognized by other colleges and universities, and is recognized for purposes of employment. So without it, you're wasting your time. And Sperling went and met with the executive coordinator of the Arizona Board of Regents to say, this is University of Phoenix. We had the former president of Greyhound Corporation was on the board, Dino DeConcini, who is the brother of the state senator, who was going to become the state senator of Arizona, and other well-known established, the former head of the Maricopa County Community College District. And they said, oh yes, any university that's applying for accreditation is okay with us. And then 5 months later, we were attacked at a regents meeting and labeled a diploma mill.
Right, and talk to me about what that accusation meant and what that catchphrase means. I mean, and this caught you off guard. You were doing something that was about helping students from your point of view, and suddenly someone was driving a knife in your back.
Well, it's, if you looked at it from their perspective, which I try to do, we had no campus. We had classes close to where people live. We didn't have full-time faculty because they're all faculty we trained and recruited that had advanced degrees and professional experience. We didn't have a bookstore. We didn't have dormitories. The students only went to class one night a week and then met with a study group outside of class. So looking at it from their prism, they look life, which is capital intensive, big beautiful campuses and classrooms and everything run to the satisfaction of the faculty rather than the satisfaction of the students. They went, oh my God, the world's coming apart. We got to kill this thing now. And the public attack in the Arizona Republic about, it wasn't just University of Phoenix, but there were 300 diploma mills in Arizona. And of course, the local newspaper took them at their word, didn't verify anything. And that was like literally, I moved there in November 1977 on a Saturday. On Sunday, I picked up the Arizona Republic, and here's this, my first greeting was, Quick Degrees College in Line for Accreditation, with all these vicious and distorted.
Right. So quite a welcome mat from the press.
They came out. It's Arizona. It's Tombstone. it's a shootout the academic corral.
Right. Now you said something interesting now that I want to follow up on. The University of Phoenix model was student-centered versus faculty-centered.
That's right.
Was that really one of the radical ideas that you and your co-founders had about the University of Phoenix? Something that was about the students, not about the faculty?
Well, we treated students as informed consumers, and they were. They're older adults. When Phoenix started, in fact, for the first 20 years, about 82% of the revenue, in tuition revenue, came from the employers of our students. The average age was 38. The HR departments came in and vetted our program. The students were people who, we weren't providing quality service or education. Believe me, they would have cut the funding immediately. And that's what really allowed us to survive, and despite this attack by the tax-supported system, who went after us, hammer and tong. And it's very difficult to respond to an attack by an established, recognized authority, and you're like nobody.
It's David and Goliath.
The only thing that I found to survive, my political tactic is very simple. I take everything, any criticism or anything anybody says about me, literally. So I went to the Arizona Commission on Higher Ed and said, could you please identify any diploma mills? They knew of none. The vocational board knew of none. I went to the Attorney General's office. They knew of none. And it didn't make any difference to the press, who just ignored it. It was still 300 diploma mills were in Arizona.
Right, and that got repeated and repeated and repeated.
And but you have to start at that point, and not. I don't attack their motives. I don't attack their character. I don't attack their morality. I just take the facts on the ground, and it's a very dangerous political tactic, because when they're trying to literally wipe you off the map, you don't have the leisure to educate people. But that was the only way to survive, because the other side had all the credibility. We were the new kids on the block. They didn't know anything about us. We had a weird educational model with no campus, part-time faculty. We didn't have a library. We pioneered electronic learning resources, which were now is widely accepted. Back then,
right.
That was an apostasy too.
Right. Now, you said that you pioneered electronic learning. So after you had all these battles to get started, you did win, in a sense. I mean, University of Phoenix did grow and did become very successful and started doing what you set out to do, educate working adults. And you were associated with it for a number of years.
Right.
But then you left.
I did.
What happened, and what do you think went wrong
with
University of Phoenix, i.e. why aren't you there now?
Well, I left for, which is not atypical for entrepreneur types who work together. The principal founder and I worked hand in glove for 20-some years, and literally fought every battle there was to fight. And you know, the hackneyed term, but he had my back and I had the University of Phoenix's back. I was responsible for all the governmental and political affairs, and I was also responsible for accreditation and state licensure and all that. So I was sort of both inside and outside. And I would say that the simplest thing that happened is that as you become more established, you tend to attract different kinds of people who would never associate with a new, unknown, unproven, and unsuccessful entity.
But yeah, I mean, failure is an orphan, and success has 5,000.
As soon as we began to obtain some stability, the revenues began to increase. We were growing, literally our student body grew 25% a year for like 15 years. It's just unbelievable. And part of it, no one believed what it was. You had to go through the trial of fire, and we went through it in every state that we were in. But it really came down to that we brought the company public based upon our successes financially and educationally in 1994. And with that, what really happened is that those of us that were really in it for the educational part of it left, and they brought in highly talented sales, marketing, and investment banking people to run this public enterprise where the stock value trumped educational outcomes. And my departure was really, I was too successful. That's the only way I can describe it. I took care of the fight. I beat back enemies at the door, the dragon at the gate, and now it was like everything.
So did you feel in some sense that your other co-founders or primary co-founders said, well, now that you've helped us build this thing and we're making money, we really don't need you anymore?
Well, I don't belong. I mean, in one sense, I relish the fight, and particularly one that's impossible. And when you get successful, then I just sort of, we built the thing, we refined it through the accreditation process. The model was resilient and robust, it worked, and it was a platform that could really be taken and applied nationally, which is what happened. And I think when I left, we were in 6 or 7 states, plus we had the online program that was literally all over the world. But after I left, they ended up with campuses in 40-some states.
Right.
But I left really a conflict with the principal founder. And part of it had to do with the fact that I dedicated my entire life to the company and worked. I mean, at one point, I didn't have a vacation for 9 years. It was like traveling 80,000 miles a year, and whatever it took 6, 7 days a week. And then as we got more stabilized, I met, we turned out to be my wife, and got married, and that seemed to be the beginning of the end, because I no longer, when she warned me, said, well, you're going to have to start paying attention to your wife instead of the company, basically. I said, well, that's the way it works.
Right.
And that's what I did. And the other thing is the stock just went crazy. And so when you have a surfeit of financial reward beyond anything I ever imagined, I'd like to say I deserve it.
So in a sense, University of Phoenix made you a rich man.
It did.
So there's no doubt about that.
Independently wealthy, I would say that.
Independently wealthy.
Right. I was able to go, and which I did. And it was a bittersweet departure. I think I'd given my all to it. It created this beautiful, powerful, robust thing. We transformed the lives of literally hundreds of thousands of working adults stuck in mid-management and supervisorial jobs with either high school diplomas or 2 or 3 years of college, who got their degrees, were able to get it. The companies loved it because they had trained, smart, experienced personnel that would stay with their companies. So we had Honeywell and Apple and Bank of America and some of the Lockheed and Watkins Johnson and Xerox, and all those loved the thing that we provided their employees, because we stabilized them, allowed them to move forward and grow with the company.
Right. Well, from the love affair with the University of Phoenix that you had, it changed. And in the second half of our show, we're going to come back and talk with John about how that love affair between students and the University of Phoenix changed to become a University of Phoenix love affair with Wall Street. We'll be right back in our second half speaking more with John Murphy. Stay tuned.
With all our wireless devices, our household needed more speed. So we left AT&T U-verse and switched to Xfinity, and now we get 4 times the internet speed. It's faster and saves us hundreds. That's not technology, that's just basic math.
Does that mean I can get a car?
Sure.
Really?
No.
More doesn't have to cost more. Switch to the Xfinity Triple Play for $99 a month for 12 months and add HD DVR service for $10 a month. Plus, get the fastest in-home Wi-Fi. Call 1-800-XFINITY today.
Welcome back. Our guest is John Murphy, author of the book Mission Forsaken, The University of Phoenix Affair with Wall Street. John, what do you mean by that title? And let's break it up. First, the Mission Forsaken part, colon, the University of Phoenix Affair with Wall Street. There's two different things there.
There are. The University of Phoenix was established solely as a university for working adults. What did that mean, and how did you affect that? One, they had to have a minimum of 2 years of work experience. They had to be 23 years of age, and they had to be employed. Why? Because the curriculum was applied rather than theoretical, and it integrated the student's experience with actually a practitioner faculty who was teaching in the evening what they did during the day. So everything had an applied focus, and you bring an 18-year-old or someone with a GED in there, they can't be active participants in that kind of environment because they don't know anything. I mean, it may be suitable to sit in a classroom with a guy lecturing because they have nothing to add to the dynamic. And what happened after the company went public, it took about 10 years, and it really was the byproduct of replacing the executive administration with sales, marketing, and investment banking people, that the values that drove that model and what I fought for to protect the integrity of, they decided to abandon it. I call forsake. They forsook their mission, with the original mission, and took anybody that had a high school diploma or GED. And when that occurred, that's a massive. When you have I call it a unified learning model, and you take one aspect of it out, which like having an 18-year-old in the class with older students with an experienced practitioner faculty member, it's not going to work educationally. Or you take some other element out. They have to be a member of a study group that meets outside of class. Well, they're not going to hold their own with 30-some-year-olds that are working.
So literally, University of Phoenix abandoned its mission to make money.
Arguably they did. Well,
yes.
And if you look at the numbers, it's true. Now what happened as a result of doing that is that their student census went from about 250,000 to 500,000. The stock price was the highest performing stock in the New York Stock Exchange for 5 years. The insiders sold about $1 billion worth of stock, and more than that with the administration. People made a lot of money. So if you look at it from Wall Street's point of view, which I call the University of Phoenix Affair with Wall Street, they became, I call it smoking hot spreadsheet bliss. That's what it was. And it worked.
Yeah.
But they traded on the integrity that I fought for all those years.
Right.
And fought back. I mean, we fought against everything, and we triumphed over every obstacle. I call it the exercise of hard political will, because there are a lot of people that see themselves as innovators and are innovators in education and a lot of other things. And the problem with their innovations, they don't have the hard political will to take on the obstacles that come in their path.
Now, do you think that University of Phoenix is still, what did you call it, smoking hot spreadsheet bliss? I mean, is it still making a lot of money for its investors?
It's actually what occurred. There were changes in the rules about student recruitment that they couldn't just take anybody in. When I was there, 65% of the students graduated within 4 years. Now, Phoenix claims 30% graduate within 6 years. The federal government says 12 or 13%. The student loan default rate when I was there was like around 5%. Now it's approaching 30%.
So now it is no longer student focused. It's investor focused.
Well, what happened when you took anybody in is by virtue of admission to an accredited school, an 18-year-old qualifies for student loans. Where at one point Phoenix's revenue, 82% was from the private sector. Now virtually every dime is from you and me. It's all student loan revenue.
So you think it's a scam to get government loans?
Well,
or is that too harsh?
It's not a scam because it's what's allowed, and there's some very smart people. when Phoenix went out there are like now 30 for-profit companies that leapt into it. In 2012, they got in $32 billion of taxpayer money. They have a lot of problems with student retention and graduation and student loan default rates, part of it because of the demographic they bring in.
Right. And now I know you've got something else in our last few moments you want to talk about. You want to use your experience with the University of Phoenix to do some additional educational reform and projects. Tell me about that.
Well, one of the things that Phoenix pioneered was online education. And we started, actually I moved to San Francisco in '88 to help start it. And it took about 8 years to really get a foothold, and part of that had to do with lack of bandwidth. The computers were so slow.
Physical stuff we're talking.
Physical stuff, and adults using computers, and started in business, and then became personal computers. And that model worked really well. It's an interactive, it's strange as it seems, but it's a virtual classroom, and the classes last a week. The students interact with each other in study groups, they interact with the instructor. And that model is one that really works well. And in this country now, we're faced with 1 million students a year dropping out of high school. We're faced with about half of the students that graduate require remediation before they can do college work after they're admitted. And K-12 education is a mess. We got 17,000 school boards. Everybody has the answer to what the solution is. And I think what has to be done, and the only way to reform K-12 education and higher education itself, is to establish what I call a gainful education test, that no one gets in, no one qualifies for student loan money until they pass a test that establishes they have the wherewithal to be able to move ahead. And because students are being passed out of high school, they call it social promotion, that are unqualified for college education. And it's not we abandon them, and the way we address the need to educate them properly is we establish a national online K-12 curricula that's delivered online.
And what do you want to call this?
I call it just proving ground education, where the students are tested coming in and going out. They're not taken away from the on the ground. They still attend regular school, but we assess what they know and don't know. And say they're in 7th grade, they're reading at a 3rd grade level. We put them in a class parallel to their ongoing activity, so parents don't have to drive them to the Sylvan or pick them up. They're not embarrassed. They can do it privately, and you put them together with similar students, a faculty member trained in this interactive model.
Right.
And we have 60 million retired adults in this country.
60 million.
60 million right now. There's no reason that every child, regardless of where they live, cannot have an electronic mentor.
Do you think that proving ground education is the 21st century version of University of Phoenix? Now we've got the technology to do what maybe you started out to try to do in the 70s?
I think it is. The problem with education is it really depends on where you live and your family structure, whether the quality of the instruction, the quality of the curriculum, and the quality of the educational experience. And you think 1 out of 2 families are divorced. Those that are still together, 80% both work. Like in San Francisco, the public school system, because we have such a small number of people under 18, doesn't get the support that like maybe down the peninsula would get, or Oakland doesn't have it because of
Right.
whatever. And what this would do is provide uniformly high quality everywhere. No one can be held back. In the summer, they don't lose traction because they're not doing anything.
Right.
Kids that have got learning disabilities, we can deal with that. We can deal with everything.
Well, we wish you luck on that. We've been
Thanks.
speaking with John Murphy, co-founder of the University of Phoenix. Next up, you'll be hearing about proving ground education. Next up, please tune in next week to see me. I'm David Perry. Thanks for watching.